Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. We hope everybody is doing awesome today.
Indeed, we do.
And as always, before we get started, we want to ask everybody to subscribe both channels, EEARTS and also over on Evolutionary Energy Arts. Now, typically when Evolutionary isn't in timeout for a strike because we didn't go along with, we posted something that didn't go along with the the programming of the world, so to speak.
With the programming, yes.
With who?
With the programming.
With who? Third base?
Second. Remember who?
Who's on second base? Okay. I got that. Yeah. So both have unique videos, and typically on Evolutionary we're going to be doing more the news type of stuff, current events. EEARTS will be more spiritual and deep into the mysteries. Right now we're doing both on EEARTS because we can't post on Evolutionary, I think, until Wednesday or Thursday of next week. So we are going to talk about Vedic astrology, karma, and the planets, but we're going to diverge a little bit first to try to give people that maybe look at things like astrology and might say, why? Why should I believe in astrology? I mean, what is there about astrology? Isn't it just hocus pocus? Isn't it just reading tea leaves? Isn't it just looking at tarot cards? Isn't it just... Well, it is. It's any and all and more. And so let's give a little bit of the scientific reasoning. Let's look into the history, and let's look at a teeny bit of why Vedic astrology is different than Western astrology, and even take a look at who and what we are and who and what the planets are.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of information there, so we are going to weave in and out different things, but we all have different personalities, and the planets have different personalities, and depending on how we're lined up with that, it kind of gives us a picture of how our life flow is going to look like.
Yes. When we start putting all the picture together, it's pretty fun and wild. Interesting, the legend of the ant people. And we actually did come in contact with ant people in New Mexico when we were in New Mexico. Honestly, the place where we were was extremely isolated. Only 200 people in the town, and we were on the on the periphery of the town, basically in Native American territory. It was a very, very interesting experience, and there was a lot of paranormal, or what you would call paranormal activity out there. And one of the set of beings that came to Cindy and I, we had some amazing meditation sessions out there, were these ant people. And so we've discerned a lot. There are ant people living on a planet that's actually closer to us than Mars or Venus right now. There's a planet closer to us than Mars or Venus. Why can't we see it? Because it's not in the visible light spectrum. It's actually in 4D. It will be visible, just as Nibiru at some point in time, probably within the next 20 years, will be fully visible to everybody. It'll be up there, and it'll be something that we'll all see. It'll be undeniable. And that's because of the ascension.
Right, and as we take care of our evolution and allow ourselves to grow, all of these things start to come into focus in different ways.
Yes, and so the ancient Hopi legend of the ant people. The Hopi Indians have lived on the high desert or northern Arizona for thousands of years. A barren but beautiful landscape was the place where the Hopi gods directed them to build a number of villages made up of pueblos, what we would call stone apartment complexes. Here the Hopi managed to flourish simply by growing corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, with very little rainfall and almost no irrigation. As we see some depictions of the quote-unquote gods, the first thing we should realize is when we're talking about gods per se to the ancient people, they're just talking about beings that have more knowledge than us. That's simple. These beings are often extraterrestrials and what we might call interdimensionals, having the capability of shifting between different densities or dimensions.
And I do believe a lot of these beings are very organic in nature, but there are others who definitely use technology to show off their skills. So this is probably why they ended up calling them gods. They had godlike abilities.
Exactly. So again, and we'll touch more on it. In the Vedic point of view, there are almost uncountable numbers of gods, but there's only one source. There's just one source that everything springs from, one source. So in a monotheistic point of view, when you say there is but one God, well, there is one source. Yet, you could say there's all this heavenly host. Well, you might view the gods as the heavenly host. You just have to shift it a little bit to understand the perspective.
Right. It's about understanding that perspective, and that can definitely take time. There's just so much information to cover, and we don't always know exactly where to start. So this is a very big, vast subject.
Absolutely. So one of the most intriguing Hopi legends involves the ant people who were crucial to the survival of the Hopi not once but twice. The so-called First World, or World Age, was apparently destroyed by fire, possibly some sort of volcanism, asteroid strike, coronal mass ejection from the sun. Yeah, could have been another one of those that's coming. From what we've seen in the mid-2040s, a solar blast, a solar wave, the solar sneeze, some call it. The second world was destroyed by ice age glaciers, pole shift. During the two global cataclysms, the virtuous members of the Hopi tribe were guided by odd-shaped cloud during the day and a moving star at night. Oh my God, that's right out of the Bible, isn't it? Moses led by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud by the day. Yep. You see how all these things are interrelated.
I know. I really thought that sounded familiar. Now I know.
It is totally familiar. As we were saying, there's nothing new. Under the stars, under the sun. So interesting, yeah. So it led him to a sky god named Sotuk Nang, who finally took him to the ant people in Hopi Anu Sinum. Anu is interesting too. There's so much distortion in the Anunnaki myths even. Much distortion everywhere we look. But again, if this world is ruled by the adversary, then the adversary is going to taint all the truths. Mm-hmm. The ant people then escorted the Hopi into subterranean caves where they found refuge and sustenance. In this legend, the ant people are portrayed as generous and industrious, giving the Hopi food when supplies ran short and teaching them the merits of food storage. In fact, another legend says the reason why the ants have such thin waists today is because they once deprived themselves of provisions in order to feed the Hopi. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
As you see the round kivas. And New Mexico is a beautiful, beautiful state. Unfortunately, the guidance, the governor, the legislation there, not so beautiful and benevolent, as the lockdown was incredibly intense there, and it was brutal and it felt yucky. And that's really the main reason why we left, besides the fact that the drought, the wildfires and all. The constellation Orion also has a thin waist. When Orion dominates the winter skies, the ants are deep in their small underground hills. These structures are similar in form to the Hopi kivas, which are subterranean communal prayer chambers. Coincidentally, the Sanskrit word ki means anthill. See how everything is tied together? And va means dwelling. So much of the knowledge that we have, again, this is what we're going to come to the conclusion. It has been taken from a much older source, which goes back to the Golden Age and goes back to the time when the benevolent beings were teaching us directly, the benevolent ones, the ones that taught us openly about the fact that we are, each one of us, has source in us, and we are eternal beings having a temporary experience as humans. And so those beings in the Golden Age, and they were there in the Silver too, although as the Silver waned, so did our ability to stay out of the muck and the mire, and slowly but surely the dark ones, gain power until we get to the Kali Yuga, and then now we're leaving the Kali Yuga, so we're starting to return upward. But when we look at this, there's a reason why these legends, there's a reason why the teachings, there's a reason why there's so many similarities. It's because this is leftover knowledge from the Golden Age that was taught to us by beings that really understand how the universe works. So each February inside their kivas, the Hopi perform the bean sprouting ceremony or bean dance called Poamu. During this time, the fires are continuously kept ablaze, turning the structures into super hot houses. The ritual commemorates a time when the Anu Sanome taught the Hopi how to sprout beans inside caves in order to survive. Interesting to note, Babylonian sky god was named Anu. The Hopi word for ant is also Anu, and the Hopi root word Naki means friends. Thus, the Hopi Anunnaki, or ant friends, may have been the same as the Sumerian Anunnaki, the beings who came to Earth from the heavens. And this is, again, where all the beings get lumped together into one phrase. And, again, that's kind of a disservice. Just like when you go into some ancient mythologies and you look at Anu, the god Anu, you could see that it's tied into natural powers. And it's the same thing. A lot of times these beings will take something older than them, something with great reverence, and they'll usurp it. This is what's been done with so much of the teachings of the world. When we look to Mother Shipton's prophecies, with the dragon's tail that comes around, causes misery, causes earthquakes, famines, pestilence, war, disease, almost the entire destruction of the world, with whole continents sinking, brand new continents rising. And then we start over. So when mankind starts to just look around, because all the chaos is finally stopped, the controllers are not in control anymore. All the earth changes are settling down. Mankind starts to come out from its hiding places and looks around. And what do they see? Well, this is from Mother Shipton's prophecy. It says, "And before the race is built anew, a silver serpent comes to view, and spews out men of like unknown, to mingle with the earth, now grown cold from its heat, and these men can enlighten the minds of future man, to intermingle and show them how to live and love, and thus endow the children with second sight, a natural thing, so that they might grow graceful, humble, and when they do, the golden age will start anew." So again, it's the ancient teachers, the benevolent ones, that come back, that teach us once again how to live in harmony with the earth, how to not destroy the earth like what we've had with the system that's in place now, how to understand things like how the universe works, which includes looking to the stars, looking to the planets, and understanding what they're saying to us by their positioning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there's a boatload of information that comes along with that. So it's kind of like, where do you start? Where do you start? And there are two different versions, but what I do like to talk about is what is astrology anyway. And if we break that down, it is the study of light and how that light is hitting our bodies and then our reaction to that. And there was a point when sages of old would very meticulously look at the stars, watch behavior, and write these things down. There was a starting point. There was a starting point in which all of this has come from. And right now, it's really, really been scattered. And we have Vedic astrology, Western astrology, there's Chinese astrology, and then there's a whole slew of other astrology. So, I mean, what do you look at? And then when you do look at it and you realize how much there is to study, that can be a lot, But when I was watching Western astrology, it's like things just never quite fit for me. And then I had my Vedic chart done, and everything just fell into place. And it wasn't just my Vedic chart, it was my nakshatra. And that is the star rising in the east when you were born. So Vedic astrology has all of the zodiac signs plus an extra 27 that Western astrology leaves out. So the nakshatra, the star rising in the east when you were born, I believe, is an actual being up in the sky. And then if you're born under that being, you're kind of like a blueprint of their personality. So there is a lot to give, a lot of information to give about a nakshatra. And then Vedic astrology, again, it seems to be a lot more decisive. And I humbly practice this Vedic astrology. There is just so much to learn. And I work through the birth chart, and that's because it's all the other charts kind of combined into one. It's one of my clients put it as, it's like the manual condensed. And so that's what I do with people.
And there are major differences between the two, Vedic astrology and Western astrology. You know, a Vedic chart looks totally different. As you see the houses, you read them counterclockwise. So the first house is here, second here, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And of course, each one has its dominant theme.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also the tilt of the earth, which I thought was really important when I learned that Vedic astrology puts into account the tilt of the earth, and Western astrology starts all of its calculations at 0. I thought, oh, okay, well, I want to go with what I feel is going to be the most accurate. And it simply was the most fitting. Now, there is a great mystery of the zodiac, and that is, where did it actually come from? Where did it start from? I have noticed with Western astrology, Vedic astrology, there is a blending of information, but it seems like Vedic is a little more accurate, and I really appreciate that about that.
Absolutely. So yes, the Earth's axis is tilted 23.5 degrees. And in actuality, you know, what we have gotten from our guides is that this is relatively recent. This is, you know, around the Younger Dryas period. This is that big destructive event that some say was an asteroid coming in, or perhaps a comet hitting Greenland, caused all the Carolina bays in the Carolinas, but also in other places in North America as well, and literally knocked the Earth off of its normal plane of existence. It is interesting too to even just think about what the Earth would be like if it was straight up as far as its axis instead of that 23.5 degree tilt, and also if the moon was not there, because again, there are tribes all over the world that have legends of a time when the moon was not there. And perhaps what we've gotten, again, it was brought in at that time period. And the moon itself is actually really a ship, is what it is. And it's a base of operations to watch all the doings on Earth. And in reality, it is actually a fourth density object. And I've also shared with you guys, I remember watching the moon and all of a sudden it went blank. Totally blank. And I was with somebody, we both saw it, we looked at each other, we looked back up, and then all of a sudden all the craters and everything came back on. It's like somebody turned off the projector. Somebody turned off the holograph. The holograph that's being superimposed on something that really is there, but it's actually a fourth density object.
Mm-hmm. A lot of things in this world that are just complete mysteries. So I think it's really important when it comes to judging things. We don't know the whole picture because we only see this little tiny sliver right now.
Well, the other thing that we've gotten too is that in a way, the sky you're looking up to every single day is also projection, because the reality is that there's ships coming and going all the time, and more ships now than maybe in recent times. And so there's a reason why there's stuff spread up in the sky. Yes, some of it is due to weather control, weather modification. Some of it is due to whatever type of biological or virological programs the controllers have going. The other portion is all about distorting and controlling the view that we have looking up and out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, there's just so much information that we are becoming perceptive to, and that's creating a lot of sensory overload. And we have talked about that in past videos where anxiety is just welling up in people and people are reacting in strange ways. But I think that's also because of additives in our environment that really shouldn't be there. And I think that's what's overloading a lot of people.
So there is the thought in modern scientific circles that the Earth and everything that we see, the whole universe, is nothing but a hologram. Just a projection. Doesn't mean it's not real, though. Again, when we look to our TV screen, for those of us that don't live in a VR world yet, you look at your TV screen, it's flat as can be. When it's turned off, it doesn't have any apparent depth or anything to it. But turn it on, really get into a good show, and you might find that you're having kind of your 3D experience. You're being pulled into, pulled into the screen. Those that have been and seen IMAX and 3D, then it's even better. But perhaps, as some scientists theorize, reality is actually on 2D. A different density being projected up into this holographic universe. And this is from Scientific American. Do we live in a holographic universe? We very well may. So that would make reality flat, so to speak. But the perception of that we are in, spherical. Interesting, is it not? An experiment going up outside Chicago, this is all the way back in 2014, will attempt to measure the intimate connections among information, matter, and space-time. If it works, it could rewrite the rules for 21st century physics. I like this next quote. Space may not be smooth and continuous. Instead, it may be digital. Space is digital, composed of tiny bits. Aha. Physicists have assumed that these bits are far too small to measure with current technology. So isn't that fascinating in the thought that we live in a digital holographic world? An illusion, so to speak. One thing that we've always gotten from the guides is that this is a temporary experience. This is a temporary experience. And it's not really home. This is not really our normal state of being. And so that's fascinating, because then when we look at the ancient Vedic texts, we look at the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and we see, this is chapter 2, verse 22 from the Gita, as a man shedding worn-out garments takes other new ones, likewise the embodied soul casting off worn-out bodies enters into others that are new. Yeah, because our normal state of being is that of pure consciousness. This is how we get around in this holographic matrix of a world. And it's a temporary existence. And we've covered this before, for those of you that have been with us for a while. When you see spirit orbs, that's our normal state of being. And of course, some might be brighter than others. Some might have different colors of the visible spectrum that are more dominant than others, depending on the emotional makeup of the being.
Mm-hmm. Right. And one thing I guess I have a hang up with when people talk about, it's an illusion. And what I have come to understand is, yes, it might be an illusion, but that definitely does not take away from a lot of the pain and or joys we experience in this life. All of this is ours. We have learned so much by coming here on Earth. It is not easy to come here on this planet. You have to be a master at manifesting to come here on Earth. So if we've made it here, that's a big hoorah for you. And the pain and the joys and everything is very, very real. But there probably is something to these this study of light that we're definitely not understanding, just because we're not quite there yet.
And again, we'll go back to the analogy of, take the greatest shows that you ever seen. What is? Let me ask you guys right now, and put it in the comments if you will. What's your favorite series that you've ever watched? Was it Game of Thrones? Was it for you old timers way, way back, like Roots? You remember Roots? Oh my gosh. And I remember being hung on that. And that was when I was like 10, 12 years old and just waiting for the next episode to come out. Was it any other series out there that pulled you in so much that you cried at some point? Like when the hero, there's some big tragedy. All right, Jon Snow has to kill her. Did you cry if you were watching every single episode? Right? It's the same sort of thing with this existence. And while we're in it, it's intense. And it does have meaning because the soul grows from every encounter that we have in this 3D apparent universe. So, yeah, it does have consequences, and there are laws, like the law of cause and effect, or we might call it karma. This is a great PDF. This was a book written in 1991, Michael Talbot's The Holographic Universe. I think I read it when it first came out, and it just opened up my eyes. There's 359 pages from a scientific but user-friendly scientific point of view. And he's also the author of Mysticism and the New Physics, because what do we find? We find that science and the mystic vision go hand in hand, especially when we're talking about quantum physics. And so, when people say stuff like, oh, that new age woo-woo, crap, it's like, all I think is, man, just completely brain dead and just totally conditioned to the point where they don't even understand what they're talking about because they haven't explored it. All they know is the programming that the indoctrination and programming they've received from the controllers that has closed their minds to how the world really works. And so there is most definitely a merger that can and will be made. It's being made now between science and mysticism. Absolutely. We do live in a quantum reality. And again, that's just recognizing that the reality that we're in is all about the observer. It's all about us. It's all about our ride. It's all about our ride. We're here for this ride. We jumped in, and you guys are thrill seekers because you jumped in at the most extreme portion of this ride that there is. The end of a Kali Yuga is intense, and you guys deserve credit for having the guts to be on the ride at this time. And so when we look at these different lokas, and loka in Sanskrit means world, we can view it in a lot of ways. You can view it as kind of like a series of ladders, going from the dark abodes and just climbing up, higher and higher and higher. Here you see the middle level, the abode of humans and animals. Now that reminds me of Midgard. We could basically put the world tree on this of the Norse legends and get a very similar point of view. Devloka, the abode of the demigods and heavenly beings. And then up at the top, Sirasila, abode of liberated beings. These are beings that are no longer in this sort of existence anymore. They're outside of it. So they're back to being pure consciousness without any sort of embodiment. And that pure consciousness that is really just one tiny little drop in a vast ocean of consciousness. So, just think about the rain. The wind lifts up the waters, so to speak, up into the clouds. The clouds move over the land after being in the ocean. The clouds release the water down onto the ground. Eventually it gathers into the rivers pour it back into the ocean. It's the same thing with consciousness. While we are basically coming down from the clouds in the form of raindrops, it appears that we're all different, and we are. Each raindrop is unique, yet ultimately it's going to return to that vast ocean of consciousness.
Right, and you can look at the raindrops as something where when it's in an ocean, you never really know where one ends and another begins. Just like our energies always blend. You never really know where one ends and one begins because everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. And this is where things can be translated to the planets to give you a better understanding of oh my gosh, what am I here to do? Because there's so much information. Where is my path? So that's really important. When I do someone's chart, it is more of like a soul alignment. I seem to have created my own method how I do a chart, and I do check chakras. I do remove blocks. We do a tuning, and all of this translates with your chart, and it's all done together. I can't seem to separate the two. And for me, I think that's like past life things that I have done, because I don't like to separate them. They just always go together.
So, again, there's many ways of looking at existence and recognizing that as we go and transverse the different densities, there's all sorts of beings that are there. As soon as we leave this physical body, we all of a sudden are no longer in the view of those that used to look at us every day. Yet we will find that there's all of a sudden a whole bunch of other people around us, including some that might have passed on that are very, very near and dear to your heart, that will all of a sudden be there welcoming you, saying, we've been waiting for you. Good to see you again. And good to be able to touch you, because you're going to be on the same density, so to speak. Again, this is something we can view in many ways, layers. You can view it as world on top of world, or world within world. It's just a matter of the way you view it. It's the same thing with the physical body and the energy body. So when we get rid of this shell, the one in the middle, again, I like viewing it as Russian dolls, where there's one inside the other, and then in the center is just simply the physical vehicle. When we shed that, the rest of it doesn't disappear. No, it's still there. Our consciousness shifts from here outwards. When we go to sleep, you ever wonder, sometimes when you go into sleep, do you ever kick? Do you ever feel like you're drifting off, or maybe you're jumping off to another, world, so to speak? Because you really are. Your consciousness is shifting outside of the body and getting ready to go have an astral trip. And then we explore on the astral density. Is it any less real than here? So the Vedas, many believe that they are the world's oldest scriptures. And there has been a concerted effort in the Western world to basically make them out to be younger than they are. But there's a lot of evidence that they're much, much older. And actually, there's astrological signs given that show that they have to be at least, at the bare minimum, from about 1900, 2000 BC, at the very, very minimum, according to the astrological signs that are given. But many believe that these are 8 to 10,000 years old, and perhaps even far older. I do think that this is, again, leftover knowledge that comes from the Golden Age. And of course, Vedic astrology is the astrology we get from the Vedic point of view. And as Cindy was saying, nakshatras are huge. There's so much information you could get just from knowing your nakshatra. You could do a whole reading that would take an hour and a half, just going in depth into the nakshatras.
Mm-hmm. Right, because all of those personalities of that being are translated into that nakshatra. So the nakshatra, whether you have the reading done or you study it yourself, it's very, very important. And I found to be very enlightening when it comes to understanding yourself. I always say this, it's almost like breaking a spell. When you realize part of your life, it's just simply written in the stars, and that's just the way it is. And it sort of brings this kind of acceptance to things where you're like, okay, well, this is what I have to work with then, so let's work with it.
Absolutely. So we get this knowledge from those known as the rishis. The rishis, or the sages, who spent all their time, again, think in terms of people like Buddha and the crowd he was hanging with when he was out there meditating in the Bodhi tree. This is all he did. And so these beings, all that they did was go into deep meditative states all day long, every day for their lives. And they were able to escape this reality and see the other densities. And they were able to teach us about those other densities. They could look up into the stars and they could meditate, and then they could come and visit the stars, but not the stars as we see them, the stars as actual beings. Because every single star, every single planet is a being like you and I. They're just on a greater scale. They've had more experience, perhaps, as an individuated being, as Source itself is always birthing new beings. It's not like there was a time when all souls were basically created at that one time. This is a continual process. So there are what we would call older souls, and there are younger souls. And the younger souls haven't had all the experiences of the older, quote-unquote, souls. And then when we look to beings that we see like these gigantic stars, some of which are 1,000 times bigger than our own sun, providing life and sustenance to an infinite number of different beings. Each one of those beings is its own universe again, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's just an amazing thing to ponder, and each one of these beings, just like every single individual raindrop, is completely unique with their own personalities and characteristics. So when we look back to that holographic nature of the universe, it's programming. And again, that article was talking about our reality being kind of a digital program. Well, when you determine when you want to come into this next embodiment, in order to achieve certain goals, the soul will look. And many times the soul might wait 20, 30, 50 years, 100 years, until the timing is right to achieve a certain goal. And now we could view that as our destiny. We've often heard the saying, probably, your destiny is written in the stars. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because you decided when to jump into here in order to achieve something you wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And I heard someone put it as a star map. You know, they said, Cindy, would you read my star map? And I just thought, wow, that's really, to me, that was just really hit it home. It's like, okay, it is. It's a map of your life. And you know, there's different, planets have different purposes. They do different things. We have manifesting planets, and we also have separating planets. And the manifesting planets are Mars and Venus. So this is how we gain things throughout life and how we bring balance. And then we have separating, which is the sun and Saturn. And Saturn is kind of like a cruel separation in a sense, because Saturn takes you away from those things that are in your life but distracting you, whereas the sun will separate you from things, but in a more voluntary way. Say, like if you go to school, you're not going to be with your friends and family in that way. So the sun is pulling your soul in that direction that you wanted to choose for this lifetime. So they all have a little different something to add and take away. And this way we can understand our emotions and our karmas, you know, and karma in the sense of cause and effect, not necessarily bad in any way. It's just, what are we supposed to be doing in this life? And that can just be studied indefinitely. So that's just something that I've really been delving deep in lately, and I found it very, very curious how even Mars and Venus, Mars is that thing that you want and you're willing to struggle and fight for it. And then Venus is that that entity, that refining entity. So if you have too much Mars, you're going to be pushing for something or trying to force something. And then if you have too much Venus, you know, things are just going to come to you too easily, and you might actually get bored, because some people really like a challenge. Well, there's definitely ways to balance these energies out so you get the maximum of each one.
Absolutely. So as we see here, a living being is eternal by nature, but due to his bondage, due to the law of cause and effect, karma, in the material existence, he has to change the body from one to another, because, you know, of course, every action brings about a set of reactions. And so, again, if we are eating all junk food, if we are not exercising, not taking care of ourselves, you know, it's pretty simple. We're going to end up deteriorating quicker. That's just a given. It'll also affect our consciousness, and we won't be as sharp mentally. We might also be able to get under the influence of these darker beings that do take advantage of individuals and actually feed off of the acts of other individuals. So, you know, conversely, if we live well, live healthy, eat healthy, and even if our life is, you know, cut short per se by others, we still are accruing a kind of beneficial karma that will help us in the next life to come. And that's why when we're in service to others, it's kind of like a natural spiral upward. Of course, you have to first take care of yourself in order to be of any service to others.
Well, and then that brings me to that Saturn energy, and that's the cruel energy, where if you're actually spending too much time on something else, then Saturn's going to take that thing away from you. And what I compare it to, like, there's so many nurturers out there that just want to take care of other people. They take care of their animals, their children, everybody else's children, and they don't spend enough time on themselves. So Saturn is going to come along and say, if you don't spend time on yourself, I'm going to put you down in bed with a flu, and then you're forced to spend time on yourself because this is something you're supposed to do to get that thing that you want in this life. So that's the kind of energies that Saturn can bring to us. It's very important to spend time on ourselves.
And then we have the fabulous Ganesha, who can actually literally kind of rewrite all this karmic contracts and programming.
I mean, if something's like so uncomfortable in this life and it's just like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, let's rewrite this something that I can comprehend and understand, that I can actually get something out of. Because sometimes in life, maybe you're just blinded with information and it's just not helping you get anywhere. Now, there's also, like, if you do want to rewrite contracts, there's also karma tied to that too. And it's just sort of a wait and see type of thing. But it's something that you can definitely look into, and you can call in Ganesh and say, I'd like to change this, and see how that goes for you.
And you could view this, again, if we're looking at our reality, as if it's a digitally programmed quantum computer simulation of a sort, then you could say, he's somebody that can hack into the program and he can modify the program at any time. So this is why we do mantras, because the mantras connect us to the beings that are in the higher densities, like fifth density and above, and even into the densities where they could literally rewrite the program of this lower density. And that's a very powerful tool to have.
Right. So when you're doing the mantras, and when we're doing the biofield tuning, that can create things in your life so things are just more coherent with you. When you can take these traumas and unravel them and replace them with good energy, then often you're able to grow and to get through that thing that you've been trying to get through. But it does take time and effort, and mantras definitely help realign you.
So, the vastness of the universe that's out there, when you just look out there and you see all the stars that are visible, and then you say, get a pair of really big binoculars. We have binoculars that weigh like 10 pounds. And, they're like a foot long, and you just, put them on and you look up there, and all of a sudden you realize everything that you thought you were seeing is just a tiny fraction of what you can now see. You could see 100 to 1,000 times more stars. Every single one of them is an amazing being, an individual, distinct personality. And in most cases, most of those stars have planets that are circling them that have all sorts of different life forms on them. And can you imagine when we go even farther out with, the best telescopes we have, and all that is out there is also within you, that you don't even really need any of this technology if we learn how to meditate properly, if we learn how to go within. Because what we can do is basically escape the physical confines of the body and allow our consciousness to shift out into one of those layers of the energy body, where we can go and we could discover for ourselves the truths of exactly how the universe works.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about those binoculars, and I'm thinking, well, they're pretty old. I bet you the same binoculars probably weigh about 2 pounds now if we weren't to buy the updated kinds. But Mike and I are a little old school. It seems to work better that way for us.
They're about 2 or 3 years old. They're not too old.
They're not.
We bought them when we were in the desert.
Oh, those ones. I thought you meant the other ones. Okay, yeah. It is a very, very, very nice binoculars, by the way. Those are nice. So a lot of information here about the study of things and understanding, and everybody comes up with their own understanding. Ultimately, it's for you. It's for you to internalize things and then fix it internally so that it works with your external. And it does take a lot of work, and we can always use some guidance. If you want to know more about what we do, you can go to our website, evolutionaryenergyarts.com. And we are so grateful for our Patreon members. We just can't thank you enough. And also, we have Ko-Fi. You can give on Ko-Fi either one time or a monthly, just like you can on Patreon. Thank you.
And there's a link to medicinal foods on every video. Lots of good stuff to boost the immune system, to strengthen your health and your body. And use coupon code EEA. You get a discount. It does support the channel. As always, guys, much love. Hope you guys found this informative. Please share your thoughts and ideas. Share also with us what you want to go more in depth into. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.